Hello, I'm John Adams, editor of Digital Photo, and welcome to this video lesson which is all about retouching your portraits. Now we've got this nice shot of our model Claudia here, but what we're going to do is do some subtle retouching and change her into this. Now if you look at the starting point, there we go, you can see we've got a couple of tiny skin blemishes, everybody has them, and we've got a little bit of sheen on the forehead there and on the end of the nose. We've also got a slight sort of straight-faced expression. We're going to curl up the corners of the mouth just to make a little bit of a smile, sort of a hint of a Mona Lisa smile. So if we look at our finishing point again, there you have it. We've got a slightly thinner nose, a slight hint of a smile, some wider eyes, and a little less shine coming off the skin. So we're going to find out how to do all these retouching skills in this tutorial. And the first thing we're going to do is start with the healing brush. So if we go back to our original picture, there we go, you'll find that on the disk it's called claudia.jpg. So open that up and then go to the healing brush. In element 7 you'll find it looks like a band-aid, and also you'll find it in the full version of Photoshop as well. Now check that you're on the healing brush itself and not the spot healing brush, they look very similar. So healing brush it is, and then what we're going to do is zoom in really tight on the face. Now we'll find a little skin blemish, there's one there, just very small. And what we're going to do is heal this. But before we do it immediately, we're going to first of all open up our layers palette and create a new layer. So we go up to window and we choose layers from the list. Now this will bring out our palettes. We can actually separate the layers palette and it's quite worth doing that. So we just grab hold of that, drag it onto the main screen, then we can close down this dock here and just have the layers floating on their own. Okay, so there's our layers palette with the background layer in place. What we're going to do is create a new layer above background, and to do that it's really simple. You just click on this icon here. It's down in the bottom in the full Photoshop, but you find it at the top of the palette in Elements. So click on that and we get layer 1 floating above the background. Now if you want to name this, it's a good practice to do so. So just double click where it says layer 1 and we'll call it Healing. There we go. Now what we're going to do is grab hold of our healing brush, and we need a brush size roughly the same size as the blemish we're going to heal. So we're just going to make that a bit smaller by using the left square brackets key. We can go down and up using those square brackets. So around about that size should do the trick. That's about the same size as the blemish. Then we hold down the Alt key, click on a clean area of skin near the blemish but not actually on the blemish. Click on that and then release Alt and just paint over. Now you'll see that nothing has happened there at all, and that's because I'm using a separate layer and I haven't ticked the All Layers box. So if I actually tick that box there in the options bar and do exactly the same thing again, we hold down Alt and click and then we paint over the area, you'll see it gets healed. And there we go, a perfect seamless blend. So look out for that one, it's in the options bar. Make sure when you use the healing brush that All Layers is ticked. Now all we need to do is hold down the spacebar and scroll around the image looking for any particular blemishes. Now of course blemishes are part of us, and if you want to get an accurate portrait then you should really leave the blemishes in place, because if there's a beauty spot or a mole in a particular place, it's there, it's part of the subject. But some subjects love to be cleaned up like a cover model, and that's what we're going to do here for demonstration purposes, because this is the kind of work you'd do if you were retouching a picture for a magazine cover. So we're just working around, holding Alt, clicking, and just removing any sort of blemishes we come across. There we go. And it doesn't take too long at all, as you can see. Just work around the image, and before long we'll be just about there. Let's just have a quick scan around. A couple of little bits and bobs on the forehead. There we go, one there, and as you can see we're really building up a perfect picture, too perfect actually, and there's been lots of accusations about magazine covers giving the wrong impression by going too far with the retouching work. But we're not moralising on the matter, we're just showing you how you do it if you want to. Let's just have another look. That's pretty good. I think our model's beautifully healed. We've got a little one there, let's just sort that one out as well. Healing brush. Hold down Alt and just paint over. There we go. Spacebar, of course, to scroll around, and that's pretty good. I don't think there's any real problems there. That would be perfectly acceptable for a magazine cover now. Okay, once you've done the healing, the next job is the whites of the eyes. We're going to first of all make a selection of the whites of the eyes. So what you need to do is make sure you're zoomed in. There we go, that should do the trick nicely. Let's just make that window a bit bigger. And I'll go in even tighter with the zoom tool. Then we pick up our polygonal lasso. You'll find that underneath the freehand lasso. So we grab hold of the polygonal lasso there, and all we're going to do is click around the whites of the eyes. So you need to be fairly accurate. That's why we zoomed in tight. But just click around like so until you've selected the whole of the white. Now we need to leave out the iris. That's a pretty good selection. Now you see we've got half the eye there, or half the white of the eye there. We need this other bit as well. So what we're going to do is add to the selection. A couple of ways of doing it. You can use these icons up in the options bar, but by far the easiest way is just to hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and then start clicking again. You can release it once you've started, and you can see that little plus sign next to the polygonal lasso, and that's telling you that you are adding to an existing selection. So we just click around there. And that's one eye done. Now, if we hold down the spacebar, scroll across, we can do the other eye as well. So again, hold Shift, remember, to add to the selection. And we click round the whites of this eye as well. There we go. Just clicking round. I think we can get all the way around that one. There we go. Got a little bit of a gap. Hold down the spacebar if you run out of room. Still holding Shift and just clicking round the whites of the eye. Then we need to leave out the iris, of course, on this second eye. Just coming back to our starting point. Just move it across a bit. And that should do the trick. Once you've done that, we need to feather the edge of that selection. And the best way to do it is by using the Refine Edge command. You'll find that up in the options bar. So just click on Refine Edge. And then in the feather slider, that's where we want to have about 5 pixels for this particular selection. So if we input 5 pixels or move the slider to get to 5, that should do the trick nicely. And you can see in the preview image that that's just showed us the selected area, and that looks okay actually. So once you've done that, click on OK. If you're using an older version of Photoshop or Elements, then you can simply go to Select and choose Feather from the list, and that will do the same job. Right, so we've got our feathered selection here. Let's just come back to full screen. We're going a little bit tighter than that so we can see what's happening. Now what we're going to do is create an adjustment layer, and we're going to use a hue saturation adjustment layer. So click on the adjustment layer icon. It's the half black, half white circle, top of the palette in Elements, bottom of the palette in Photoshop. Click on that and choose Hue Saturation from the list. This will launch your Hue Sat palette. So that'll pop up on screen. And to brighten the eyes, or brighten the whites of the eyes, what we're going to do is move the lightness slider. If we move it to the left, we get a rather devilish looking expression. If we move it to the right, of course, we whiten those eyes. Now that's obviously too far. We've got kind of glowing eyes going on there. But an amount of round about 30 should be just about right. So put in a lighten amount of about 30, plus 30 there. You can see those eyes brighten up nicely. And if you want to check the before and after, just click on the preview box. And you can see there we've got slightly dull grey eyes, and there's our brightened eyes. So that's done the trick. Click OK to that. And we've got rid of the blemishes on the skin, and we've brightened up the eyes. 2 important steps in retouching work. Now for our third step, we're going to do some airbrushing. In the good old days, the art of retouching was actually called airbrushing, and we're going to use those skills now, but in the digital domain. So what we need, first of all, is a new layer. So we create a new layer again, just click on the new layer icon, and this time we're going to call it Airbrush. I think that makes sense. We're actually going to use a paintbrush for this particular new layer. So grab hold of the brush tool, there it is, and we just want a bog standard brush. Size, we want it to be soft-edged and about 60 pixels. So we can increase size using the square brackets keys. If you just look up in the options bar up the top here, you can see size increase till it gets to about 60. Now for opacity in the options bar, we're going to drop it right down to about 15%. Something like that should do the trick. So that means that our brush is hardly going to show. So we're going to get a very subtle effect once we start painting. Now we're going a little bit tighter on our model. And we're just going to pick these hot spots where there's a little bit of shine. We're going to dull them down by using some of the colour from the surrounding area, but at a very low opacity. So with our brush tool, we're going to hold down the Alt key and click on an area near the hot spot, and that samples the colour into the foreground colour swatch here. We're now just going to gently click over those areas, and you can see that's already worked. That's taken the shine off. So we now look at other areas. Let's a little bit on the chin. And then we do a bit here, maybe 2 strokes, a little bit across there. And that's probably enough work. We need a little hint of it coming through. That's good. Now we're going to work under the eyes. Again, we've got that 15% opacity. I'll just sample a new colour now. Alt and click around about here. Just a little bit of work there. You can see it's just smoothing the skin. There we go. Then we move over the other side. It's quite subtle work this, so if you do overdo it, don't worry too much, because all we have to do is reduce the opacity on the airbrush layer. Because if we see what we've done, we can switch that on and off. There's our original, there's the airbrush layer. It looks a bit artificial when you compare them directly in that way. But if you look at them in isolation, you can see that that shot looks pretty good. It just looks like it's been a little bit cleaned up. So I'm happy with that. Take some time doing it because you may want to really perfect that. But just add a little bit of the surrounding skin colour, 15% opacity, onto a new airbrush layer. And as I say, if you go too far, don't worry, because you can just reduce the opacity of that layer to tone down the effect. And we could go for something like an 80% on this one, just to keep the normal lines and wrinkles that you find on a face. Okay, so now that's done, we're going to move on to our next task. And that's going to be tidying up the hair. Now before we start doing this, we're going to first crunch all our layers into one. This is really easy to do. If we just move the layers palette over a bit, hold down the Alt key, click on the flyout arrow here, hold the mouse down all the time. I haven't released the mouse yet. Go down to Merge Visible, release the mouse on that, and then release the Alt key, and you get layer 1 at the top of the list here. And that consists of everything you've done so far. So that's all of our layers. We can switch them off now. We've been condensed into this new layer at the top of the stack. So it's a bit like flattening the image, only we haven't flattened it. We've still got all these if we need to go back. Now we're going to use this new layer at the top to tidy up the hair. So let's just pop back to full screen a second. There we go. We've got a few tousle bits here and there, and we're just going to tidy these up. We're going to use the clone stamp tool, another really useful tool when you're retouching a portrait. Let's zoom in on what we perceive to be a problem area. There we go. All we're going to do is take the clone stamp. There it is. Make sure that's the right one and not the pattern stamp tool. Make sure it's clone stamp tool selected. And then we just take a brush, something around sort of 100 pixels or so, and we need to sample an area of the background, just as we did with the healing brush. We sample this area here, so we hold Alt and click, and then we're going to paint over these little strands of hair to get them out the way. And all we're doing is doing a quick haircut, effectively. Just by sampling new points and cloning over, we're just gently tidying up these little strands of hair that have escaped. That's it. That'll take a short while just to work around the model and do that. You can see it's very, very simple. We're just sampling and then painting over the areas of hair. That's the kind of thing. You may find perhaps there's some sensor dirt or a couple of splodges on whatever background you have in place. You may want to do this as well, just to clean up the background. And that's a normal thing to do. If you're going to use the same background that you have in your shot, then take a look all the way around it. Just scan around with the, just scroll around. There's a little spot there. Let's just get rid of that. Alt and click. And by using the clone stamp tool in this way, we can just clean up the background and trim the model's hair in this way. That's looking pretty good. Just a bit more work down this side. Yeah, that's working quite well. Just cloning and cleaning as we go. A couple of strands here. And that's the job done. Great, so that's the haircut performed. We can double click the hand tool to come back to full screen. That's looking nice and tidy now. And before we go on to our next stage, what we're going to do is make a copy of everything we've done. We're going to go to liquefy next, and things can go wrong when you're using the liquefy filter. So we're going to just get some belt and braces and back up our layer. So we're just going to hit Control and J, which is a quick way of copying a layer. So we have a direct copy of the layer we've just worked on. And this direct copy is the one we're going to use liquefy on. Now, if you're using the full version of Photoshop, you need to go to Filter, Liquefy. But if you're using Elements, just go to Filter, Distort and Liquefy. There it is there. Click on that. And we get a fairly large dialog box opening up. You see some familiar tools down the left-hand side. There's our zoom tool and our hand tool, which helps us to scroll around or zoom into the image. We're going to zoom in. So you use those just the same as you would in the normal Photoshop or Elements interface. Now we're zoomed in tight, we're going to do a little restructuring. And the first thing we're going to do is slightly enlarge the eyes. So we're going to use the bloat tool. Now this is up here. You can find it there. It's like a little circle. Click on the bloat tool. And then we need to get a brush size about right. That's too big there. So we just hit the left square bracket key to come down. Something like that. Something that covers the whole of the eye should do. Make sure the tool's centered on the eye and then just very quickly click. You'll see a slight increase in the eye size. Do the same on the other one. Centered on the eye. Click once. There's that slight increase again, and that just makes a model look slightly more welcoming just by enlarging the eyes a touch. We're going to do the same thing to the lips now, just the same thing again, couple of clicks, just to enlarge the mouth slightly. That's it, and that's enough. Don't go over the top with the liquify tool. It's really easy to do so, but you'll turn everyone into a caricature if you're not careful. So just very small adjustments, that's all you need. Now the next thing, we're going to use the pucker tool. Got to be careful how I say that. That's above the bloat tool in the list, so click on the pucker tool. We're going to work on the nose. We need a smaller brush now, so just reduce brush size to something around there. It's around sort of 30 in the elements interface. I'm just going to click very gently. You can see there, we're just reducing the nose a touch. Not too much, just a little bit. That's it there. Just a few clicks. I think that's enough there, so that's the job done there. And next up we're going to use the forward warp tool, which sounds very Star Trek. I think it's the favourite name for a tool I have in the whole of Photoshop. Forward warp. Sounds like you're going somewhere. So let's pick that, it's up the top of the list here. And what this does, it allows you to shift pixels. You can actually drag parts of an image around. Now obviously that's too extreme there, looks like the Joker from Batman. So I'll hit Ctrl and Z just to undo that last state. And what we're going to do is get ourselves a slightly smaller brush, something that takes in the corner of the mouth, and then we're just going to slowly just tweak the mouth upwards, just the corner there. And of course what we're doing is creating a subtle smile. I think that's probably enough. Just a small change like that. And once we've done that, we're going to use the same tool, the warp tool, the forward warp, slightly smaller brush. And I'm just going to distance the eyebrows from the eye a touch, particularly just there and there. So it's the arch of the eyebrow and the, whatever that bit's called, I don't know, the bit nearest the nose of the eyebrow. We're just pulling those up slightly. And that just gives a slightly friendlier expression. It's very subtle, this sort of work, so be careful with it. And that's just about it. But before we move away, we're just going to do another bit of reshaping, and that's on the jawline here. We're just going to kind of thinify the face slightly. So a slightly larger brush now. Then we're just going to move that jawline inwards, bit by bit. You need to be really gentle with these kind of movements. That's the kind of thing. And a little bit there as well. And these are all things that are done on just about every magazine cover you'll come across, particularly the women's magazines, women's monthlies and the glosses. All do this kind of retouching. And of course, you're not just restricted to retouching faces or resculpting or reshaping faces. Lots of bodies are done as well. So people develop thinner waistlines and thinner thighs and all kinds of things through the power of a bit of liquifying. So I think that's enough now for our model. That's that job done. Once you've done all those changes, click OK to your liquify, and that filter will process. There we go, and the liquefying will be complete. Now, if we look at our model again, we'll just zoom in. This is our original shot in our Photoshop interface. We can see there, that's our liquify layer. And if we click the before and after, click the eye icon on and off, you can see the changes we've made. And it is actually quite dramatic. They're very subtle changes. Let's just go a bit larger on the screen. There we go. You can see there, that's the before where we've done the retouching. We've done a lot of work already. And then that's the after. That's with liquify. And hopefully you can see that there's a slightly more welcoming, slightly friendlier face than the kind of the straight expression that we shot in the first place. You see the eyebrows lift, a slight smile, slightly fuller eyes, slightly fuller lips, slightly smaller nose, and a slightly thinner jawline. And that's the kind of work you do when you want to retouch a portrait. So if we look back right to the beginning, you can see what we've done. If we switch off all those eye icons, that's our original. We've done some healing work on a separate layer, so you can actually see the healing you've done, just cleaning up those tiny blemishes here and there. We've then made a hue saturation change just to the whites of the eyes, and that's brightened the whites, and given a slightly fresher appearance. Then we've done our airbrushing. We've got a little bit of shine here and there on the skin, so we've just taken that down using a very low opacity brush and using colours sampled from elsewhere on the skin. And then we've finished off with a bit of liquefying. We've actually re-sculpted the face slightly. We've added a smile, raised the eyebrows, thinned the nose a touch, and thinned the jawline. So that's a typical example of retouching work. Give that a try with the image on the CD, and then perhaps try it with your own portraits and see how you get on. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.